One day, when I came home, I found our daughter completely exhausted on the sofa.
Camilla, I rushed to our daughter in panic.
Camilla's body was so hot that I could tell she had a fever even without using a thermometer. There was no sign of her husband in the house, just our daughter sleeping exhausted.
Why isn't he here? He was supposed to take care of Camilla.
But to my surprise, her husband told me, whose furious and outrageous lie. Why wasn't he at home? While I was trembling in rage, the truth began to unfold. The story concludes with a shocking twist. Please stay tuned until the end. My name is Cecilia. My husband's name is Beau. We live with our 5-year-old daughter, Camilla. We've been married for 6 years. Even after having a child, I wanted to continue working. However, Camilla was weak and got sick easily and developed a fever often. It became impossible for me to work, so I became a full-time homemaker. I thought that my husband could work in the meantime, and Camilla would get healthier and stronger as she gets older. When Camilla turned 3, my husband's job became more demanding, and we spent time together as a family less and less. He'd always left household chores and the responsibility to take care of our child entirely to me, and recently he started coming home after midnight saying that he is busy at work. But the reason why we are able to live like this is all because he works hard. I should support him, especially at a time like this. That's what I believed. One day, I was invited to my friend's wedding. However, she lives in my hometown, and it would take a whole day to attend the wedding since my hometown is far away. But my friend and I were very close, and I really wanted to see her on her special day. So I decided to discuss it with my husband. He said, "Sure, go ahead. I can take care of Camilla that day." I was worried about leaving my daughter with him, especially since she wasn't very healthy. But he had been spending very little time with her due to his busy schedule recently, so I thought it was a good chance for my daughter to spend time with her daddy while I was away. Besides, she had been in good condition lately. That's why I made up my mind and decided to attend my friend's wedding. On the day of the wedding, I started preparing early in the morning and said, "Please take good care of Camilla today to make husband." He replied, "Sure, leave it to me. Have a great time," and saw me off. Thanks to my husband, I was able to attend my friend's wedding. I was happy to see my close friend in her wedding dress. After the ceremony, I said my goodbyes and headed home. I came home at 8 p.m.
I feel bad for having made him look after Camilla all day.
I opened the front door carrying gifts for both of them. The house was pitch dark with no lights on.
I wonder if they went out for dinner.
I thought as I walked to the living room and turned on the lights. There, my daughter was lying motionless on the sofa.
Camilla?
And I rushed to my daughter in panic. Her body was so hot that I could tell that she had a fever without using a thermometer. I immediately called a taxi. The patients took handles. They lived in the countryside, and the hospital was too far to reach without a car. Besides, I don't have a driver's license. I rushed my daughter to the hospital by a taxi. As a result, she tested positive for influenza. After getting some medication, I returned home with her. Her fever had gone down after receiving treatment at the hospital, and she seemed to be feeling better. She fell fast asleep on the bed, breathing peacefully. At that moment, I remembered something.
Why wasn't my husband at home?
I took out my phone and tried calling him. It was already 11 p.m.
You're back already. You are back early.
My husband casually said,
Where are you and what are you doing? Camilla had a fever. You weren't looking after her at all.
I replied in frustration.
What could I do? Camilla seemed fine when I left. I just went to the convenience store for a little while. Why are you making such a big deal out of it?
My husband retorted,
To the convenience store, came home at 8 p.m. How many hours could you possibly spend at the store? Stop lying.
I exclaimed.
Stop nagging. You and Camilla are living off my earnings. You don't have a right to talk to me like that.
My husband snapped.
Do you even realize how much she had been suffering on her own?
I asked.
I don't want to hear it. I won't be coming home tonight, and I'm going on a 3-night, 4-day business trip starting tomorrow. Don't call me.
My husband shouted and hung up. It's terrible. My husband is always like this. He never thinks about Camilla or me. Oxwically, when Camilla had a fever before, he said, Did you let her catch a cold again? It's your job to take care of her health. You're a stay-at-home mom, so do your job properly.
You let her catch a cold again. It's your job to take care of her health. You're a stay-at-home mom, so do your job properly. I'm not gonna nurse a sick child. Besides, if it's just a cold, she just needs to take some medicine and sleep and she'll be fine.
My husband even blamed me for my daughter's fever. While my daughter suffered from a fever, I cared for her, changing her ice pack and making her change clothes when she sweated. I also felt feverish, so I checked and my temperature was over 38 degrees Celsius. The incubation period for the flu is 2 days, they say. Unbeknownst to me, it seemed I had also contracted the flu. Feeling dizzy, I texted my husband.
I have a fever too. Can't you cancel the business trip? Or can't someone else take your place and go on the business trip?
Purely, I'm working. I'm not going on a vacation. There's no one who can take my place and go on the business trip. Just rest and recover from your cold. And I told you not to contact me. Work, it's annoying.
His response was heartless. Can you come home and take Camilla and me to the hospital, please? I texted my husband multiple times, but he ignored. He probably thought it was just a cold, and it's not a big deal since he is healthy and hardly ever gets sick. My daughter and I were out of breath as the fever seemed to be gradually rising. Our condition was deteriorating rapidly. A few hours later, I finally received a response from him. You're overreacting, go to bed. At that point, I must have lost consciousness next to my daughter's bed. The next thing I knew, I was lying in a hospital bed. When I looked to the side, I saw my mother with a worried look. She was holding Camilla. And see, according to my mother, my friend had texted me a thank you message, even though it was late at night. However, no matter how many times she sent messages, I never read them. Concerned, my friend called me and I apparently said help. I had no memory of it, probably because my fever was rising rapidly and I was in a daze. My friend was startled and spoke to me several times, but when I did not respond, she said she contacted my parents. When my parents heard about it, they rushed to my house. Upon arriving at my house, my parents were shocked because I was unconscious, and their granddaughter was lying exhausted from the fever and had cracked a room. Head to the room. After receiving intravenous fluids at the hospital, we began to recover slightly, so my father drove us to their house in his car. After receiving intravenous fluids at the hospital, we began to recover slightly, so my father drove us to their house in his car. At my parents' place, we gradually recovered thanks to my mother's devoted care. My daughter had also become much livelier. However, something seemed off about my daughter. Even when I tried talking to her, she completely ignored me. I asked her, "Why? Don't you like mommy anymore?"
She made an unhappy face and said angrily, "You went out to have fun leaving me behind when I was sick? That's not nice." What?
I couldn't comprehend what my daughter was saying. I explained to her why I had gone out, telling her that I went to my friend's wedding and came home immediately after the wedding. When I explained it to her in a way a child could understand, she seemed to finally get it.
Mom, I'm sorry. Actually,
my daughter began. According to her, when my husband was about to leave, she started feeling unwell. So she told him, "Addie, I feel dizzy."
He replied to her coldly, "Mommy doesn't like you, that's why she left you with me, so that she can go out to have fun. I'm going to go out now."
what Mommy did that? If you're not feeling well, just sleep and you'll be fine. Make sure to stay in bed until I come back. I feel dizzy and my head hurts.
Don't care. If you want to blame someone, blame Mommy, who left her child behind to have fun. And we go out. He yelled at her and left the house.
So, despite feeling sick, my daughter was home alone. Furthermore, for some reason, my husband had lied to my daughter, painting me as the villain. When I explained the situation to my daughter, she seemed to understand and went back to sleep, feeling reassured. While looking at her sleeping face, I couldn't help but wonder, why would he tell such lies?
Just then, my mother came into the room.
I thanked her and said, "I'm sorry for all the trouble." She immediately called my in-laws. My in-laws doted on Camila as much as, if not more than, my parents did. When they learned that their son had gone out leaving their granddaughter alone while she was suffering, they exclaimed, "What peaks on earth was that idiot thinking?" They were more furious than my mother and me. My mother, who was furious, contacted my in-laws, and when they learned of their son's misdeeds, their guts must have churned. My mother, who was furious, contacted my in-laws, and when they learned of their son's misdeeds, their guts must have churned. Furthermore, a shocking revelation emerged from this situation. Upon receiving the news from my mother, my in-laws apparently called my husband's company. When they inquired, it became clear that my husband hadn't been on any business trips or similar activities. My husband had actually taken a paid leave without telling me. When I heard that, I was trembling with anger. He wasn't on a business trip, and he had taken a paid leave. I see. One thing came to mind for my in-laws, my parents, and myself. We thought that my husband must have gone on a trip with a lover. How could he go on a trip with a lover, leaving me and our daughter, who were both sick, behind? He had lied so easily. he better be prepared for some serious consequences when he returns. But considering how angry everyone is, as for me, I wished he'd never come back. That's how I felt. As though we were waiting for my husband, fuming with anger. He didn't return even after the date he was supposed to come back. More than a week has passed. My husband showed up at my parents' house. I was speechless when we saw him, and he was equally shocked to find his parents there. First, I'd like to explain why my husband came to my parents' house instead of returning to his own. While I was unwell, my parents had hired a private investigator to look into my husband's activities. Actually, I had been recovering well thanks to my mother's attentive care. Since my daughter's condition hadn't stabilized yet, she was recuperating at my parents' home. I went back home taking my father with me. Then we hastily began preparing for the movie. I called the moving company while my father was driving, and I said, "Hello, can you help us with moving our belongings?"
At that moment, what my daughter had told me before came to my mind. Even though I begged him not to, Daddy ignored me and left.
To make a young child say something like that, my husband must have valued his affair partner more than our daughter or me.
I was still recovering from my illness, but I was able to move around when I remembered my husband's bad behavior of ignoring my daughter even when she told him, "Don't leave me."
The moving process went smoothly. My father-in-law was also furious, just like me. He used to have a job requiring following strict rules when he was younger, so he didn't seem to be able to forgive his son's behavior. Besides, my husband had got the current job thanks to my father-in-law's connection. As I mentioned before, my in-laws dote on my daughter. They even built a new house for us when she was born. When my father-in-law learned that his son was having an affair, leaving their grandchild, who was sick, alone, he was extremely upset. "We're going to sell that house. It's in my name. I won't give a place for that foolish son to return to." Just with that, he sold our house where we used to live, and my daughter and I started living at my parents' house. When my husband comes home, he'll see the E for sale sign. It's quite funny. He returned from the trip with his lover in this situation. My husband came to my parents' house, where both sets of parents were gathered, waiting for him. It seems that my in-laws had told him that I was staying at my parents' house. The purifier went to Gio. Though we had been waiting for him eagerly, I became speechless when he finally showed up. His face was swollen, like he had been stung by a bee.
What on earth happened to your face?
Silly, I was truly in the wrong place, forgive me.
The moment he saw their faces, he turned pale. First, my father-in-law punched my husband. "How dare you show your face here?" My husband staggered when my father-in-law punched him. My mother-in-law chimed in. "You idiot. What have you been doing for a whole week?" She shouted as she gave him a series of slaps back and forth. My husband then collapsed to his knees and began sobbing. It's about my in-laws couldn't seem to contain their anger and scolded my husband even more. It was a complete chaos in my parents' house. To move forward with the conversation, I tried to calm down my in-laws and agreed to hear my husband out.
Celia, I was truly in the wrong. Please forgive me, sakat bad doubt. According to him, He had indeed gone on trip with his lover.
Thank you for reserving such a lovely hotel for us. I'm falling for you even more now.
They went to a famous hotel known for being difficult to book. My husband had thought they would have a lovey-dovey time together there. But as they say, when you do something wrong, you're bound to face consequences. Ati fried my team box. On the first night at the hotel, my husband, who had been in contact with me and our daughter, came down with the flu. His lover, who had been with him since the day before the trip, also fell ill on the second day of their getaway. Moreover, you get a high fever with this flu. Even I had succumbed to it. The two, who had expected a passionate night together, were now bedridden with high fevers. My husband was always nice and healthy, so he recovered quickly. However, his lover's condition continued to worsen. My husband told his lover, who had a high fever and was feeling dizzy. My husband told his lover, who had a high fever and was feeling dizzy, you would recover from a cold if you just take it easy and sleep, and didn't take her to the hospital. But her condition only deteriorated further. In the end, her condition suddenly changed and she became unconscious in the middle of the night. My husband had also said to us, you would recover from a cold if you just take it easy and sleep. So he had said the same to his lover and left it at that. That's when he called an ambulance. She received treatment in the ICU, but she is still in critical condition right now. It turns out his lover had asthma. She already had that medical condition to begin with, and she had contracted the flu on top of that, which made her very ill. Naturally, the hospital contacted Emily. This is when her parents found out about my husband's infidelity. According to the private investigator, she is my husband's subordinate, and she is 23 years old. Her father was furious with. He learned about the inappropriate relationship between his daughter and her boss at the company. Naturally, my husband became the target of their anger. The reason why my husband's face was swollen was because he had been beaten so much by his lover's parents. On top of that, her parents are planning to sue him. Furthermore, this whole situation has become known at his workplace, as he explaining things to various people. He couldn't return home for a week. I was left speechless by the intensity of my husband's story.
I love you and Camilla the most. I finally understand that. I was foolish. Let's continue to live as a happy family.
My parents and my in-laws were shocked. What nonsense are you spouting? I'm divorcing you, Camilla, and I went through a lot because of you. How could I forgive someone who went on a trip with his lover when his wife's and daughter's lives were in danger? Divorce? My husband stammered, "You're joking, right? You're the only one for me?" He probably doesn't know what to do now since his lover. His parents have told him that they are suing him. I wanted to say I don't fucking care. My husband, who just wouldn't give up, kept saying, "Aren't we a family? Please help me." And he cried even more. I couldn't help but think that he was being brazen. In the end, my in-laws kicked him out of the house. They even disowned him, and they were yelling at him. To me, a husband who was flirting with a lover is just gross. I received a lump sum of alimony and child support through my in-laws. Thus, my husband and I divorced. Speaking of my ex-husband, he was demoted and transferred to an office in a remote place when the company found out about his infidelity. Speaking of my ex-husband, he was demoted and transferred to an office in a remote location when the company discovered his infidelity. However, even the people at his new office gossiped about his infidelity. He was very uncomfortable and eventually quit the company. Now, he has multiple part-time jobs to pay child support. He has also been sued by his lover's parents and is in the midst of a civil lawsuit. Despite the divorce, I still maintain a relationship with my in-laws. When I divorced my husband, my father-in-law said to me, "We sold the house. Please accept this money, Cecilia. It's our way of making amends. Even though we're no longer your in-laws, Camilla is still our grandchild. Please use this money for her education," he pleaded. I refused multiple times, but my father-in-law insisted. "Please accept the money. Just think of it as being for our grandchild's education and child's future." So, I accepted with gratitude in the end. As the house which we used to live in was sold for a good price due to its excellent location. Therefore, I received more than enough money to send my daughter to college. I'm so fortunate to be surrounded by kind in-laws and parents. To repay their kindness, I am determined to raise my daughter into a fine adult.